Hypixel Skyblock is a game with thousands of custom items, and among those items include some extremely useless items that nearly every player is never going to use. Today, we're going to cover some of the stupidest items in this game, pointing out why they're useless and why you should avoid ever using them. Before going into this video though, we do quickly want to ask you guys to subscribe to our channel. We're rounding up to 6,000 subscribers, and with 85% of you guys not subscribed, we would appreciate it a ton, and you can always change your mind later. Without wasting any more of your time, let's move into the video. Firstly, we're going to talk about the fish in this game. And I'm not talking about the regular sea creatures, I'm talking about these cosmetic fish here. In Skyblock there are many types of cosmetic fish that bring nothing special to the game, and some even being incredibly rare or expensive. The two biggest fish that I'll be bringing up are the Gabagool fish and the Storm Goldor and Maxor fish. The reason I say two is because these are all in the same category. Firstly, the Gabagool fish is a 1 in 4 million chance to get from an Inferno minion, which is almost 3 times as rare as an Inferno Apex, which sells for 1 billion coins. Now if you look at the sell price here, it's about 35 million coins, so the disparity is a little bit off. And then next we have the 3 witherfishes, being the Storm, Goldor, and Maxor the fish. If you've played F7 or M7 before, you know that these fish are just a waste of a chest space, and they're just pretty much worthless. Assuming you go for something like class average 50, they stack your inventory with no actual buyers. And not to mention the absurd RNG meter score that you need to get one. Now as you can see, in M7, a Necron's handle is about 231,000 score if you go all the way and fill it up. Now, if you wanted to get something like a 5th Master Star, it would be about 138,000, so about half as much as a Necron's handle. But if you wanted to get a Storm the fish, a Maxor the fish, or a Goldor the fish, which keep in mind is about 50,000 coins, you're going to need 833,000 RNG meter score, compared to the 200,000 for the Necron's handle. Now why this is even here, nobody knows. They're very common, they do not actually cost this much. They are incredibly common, they do not actually appear this rarely. I'd say they're almost in like 1 every 5 runs, if not more common, you'll get one of these. And then of course we have the Necrons die over here at 1.3 million. But as you can see, completely useless, 2 times a meter. Why do these items exist? Nobody knows. Now next up we have something that has to relate to Dark Oak, and it is what I'm wearing right now, which is the Armor of Growth. Now this armor is just simply pretty bad stat-wise, and the ability itself is also just weird. Now this armor has 2 specific uses, and that's the only thing that doesn't make this a completely useless item. The first one is that whenever you equip it for the first time, you actually get a Hypixel achievement, so if you care about those, then you get some achievement points. And then the other use is that it's used to upgrade into Mastiff armor, which is the Sven Slayer armor. And honestly, I think that this armor was in the game before they came up with Slayer, and they had to find some sort of use for it. So that's when they incorporated the Mastiff armor, and they just said, okay, well, this can just be a part of the crafting recipe, and that's about it. Nobody's ever actually used this armor. Now, while we're on the topic of armor, what's with the armor of the pack? Looking at this armor, it gives a little bit of health and defense, but then it gets pretty weird. First, I'm going to bring up the defense against animals. First, I'm going to talk about the defense against animals perk. There is very, very few animals in this game that will harm you, so why isn't it just given as a normal stat in the set? Now this full set bonus is incredibly useless because, first off, when are you ever going to see anybody wearing this armor for combat in all of your time playing Skyblock? Then second off, if you do see that person, the 1 in a million chance, you would also have to be wearing that armor and be within 30 blocks of them, and you would get a whole 35 strength and 80 defense from them. In fact, this armor is so bad that the admins even acknowledged it by using the leggings of the pack as a crafting recipe and a random item in the rift. Now this is the only piece in the rift that is actually used for a crafting recipe, so I'm pretty sure that whenever they did this, they were acknowledging that there's no actual use for the item. And while we're on the topic of the rift, I would like to mention the Rift Ferret pet. And let me tell you, this pet is useless on so many levels. Firstly, this pet can be tier boosted, but it has absolutely no legendary perk. The only reason that you would ever tier boost this is so you can get the 3 extra Skyblock XP that you get from tier boosting a pet. And speaking of the perks, the only perk that's actually on this pet is completely useless. It gives you 10% extra experience from XP orbs. Well, as you can see, I'll equip it really quick and I'll put a level on it, and we're going to see what happens to the perk. Now as you can see, if I get this pet to level 2, originally it was 10%, right? It is still 10% at level 2, and this does not change all the way up to level 100. At level 100, this pet looks the exact same, and the only difference is that the intelligence is actually decreased even more. Now, not every enchant in this game is good, and there are many examples of this. Firstly, let's talk about the most notable one, No Pain, No Gain. This ultimate enchant obtained from dungeons is completely useless, as first it gives near nothing for the slot of your only ultimate enchant, rewarding 10 XP orbs a hit, which might sound like a bit of XP, but in reality, when compared to the Titanic bottle's 1.1 million XP, it completely invalidates this enchant. Next, we have Lifesteal. This enchant seems good on a surface, and to the naked eye, sure, but this enchant is completely useless when compared to Siphon. Since Lifesteal doesn't work on magic weapons, and since you should always have 100% crit chance, Siphon is always going to reward you with more healing 100% of the time. Next we have Thunderbolt, which you'll never see from anybody, as there's pretty much no use case, which makes using this worth it. It does half the damage of Thunderlord, and the fact that Thunderlord just overall has a more reasonable use. And finally we have Corruption, which is another horrible one, because it will corrupt 5% of your fished up mobs. Now this is really annoying when you're fishing, because whenever you're fishing, you either want all of your mobs to be corrupted or none of them. You don't want a little bit of some and a little bit of the other. Now similar to the topic of the video, you should never buy enchants for a weaker version of an item. If people make something like a Fatal Tempo Juju or a T7 Giant Sword, it's really stupid. These enchants don't make a huge difference compared to an actual gear upgrade, and it's better you just save the money than trying to make your cheaper variant work. When trying to resell an item like that, it's a good chance that no one's ever going to buy it and it'll just have a terrible resale value. On this topic, when buying a really expensive item, like a Kim 5 Daedalus Axe, always check the auction before you craft something like this. These items tend to be listed on the auction house for way less than what a normal craft would end up being, and it'll just save a ton of money. And as I mentioned, an item like the Chimera 5 Daedalus Axe doesn't have that insane demand as other items, so people are just going to undercut it a ton to liquidate that part of their profile. Now finally, let's talk about some pet items. Pet items can be pretty tricky to find out which is the best, as there's so many options, but I think it's fair to quickly go over some of the ones that will never have a use. Both the Big Teeth and the Bigger Teeth only give crit chance, and considering that there are many better uses for a pet item slot, and you should already have 100 crit chance, and if you're not getting it, a pet item is not how you should be getting it. You just cannot justify this taking up an entire slot. Now the same thing goes for the Hardened Scales and the Sharpened Claws. These also both have like a tier 2 variant from Diana. You just can't justify getting a little bit of crit damage or a little bit of defense from one pet item. Now the Reaper Gem is probably an item that most of you don't even remember being added to the game. It's a reward from getting Revenant Slayer level 8, and what it does is it gives you 8 ferocity for 5 seconds on kill. Now this is a one-time co-op soulbound reward that I guess you can also buy from Rusty, but you'll never have to use it in the first place because it's so useless. First off, the ferocity on it doesn't even stack, so you're only getting 8 ferocity every 5 seconds, which you're just not going to notice at all. And finally, we have the Bubblegum over here. Now this pet item is going to give you 2 times your power orb duration. And considering that you're never going to need to have a power orb in the same spot for 2 straight minutes, and it's also going to take up a pet item slot, you just can't justify spending 5 million coins on this. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. There is dozens of more items that have just as little use as the ones we mentioned here, like the island cosmetics or any other weapons and items. But we would honestly make this video years long if we did go over each one. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a good one.